All right, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the folks joining the community call, and especially on this holiday time. So we are excited to share what we're doing with what we call defkit, or it's a development kit for building out definitions. One of the primary reasons being that Q, while great and flexible, has its own pitfalls in ability to adopt or increase adoption. And We thought hard about trying to allow other languages, and that increases the complexity manifold. So in the end, we went with the simplest approach, which is about building out a facade on top of Q that sort of compiles from a statically typed language, into Q. And For the time being, we are only looking at Go, as Go being the lingua franca for most of DevOps tools, also Kubernetes and Kubevela per se. So we started looking at that, and there's a enhancement proposal for that. I am going to share my screen, um, and here we are. This is currently in the review phase. I encourage everybody to take a look at this. But the entire idea is that we should be able to use Go so that we get the familiar tooling, the IDE support. We can unit test these definitions, and also put in some dynamic things in there that we need to that we could evaluate before putting out the Q code. Um, in short, this is how an example looks like. Let's take, if I have a web service, then I can create a parameter. I can create image, replica, CPU, and then mention them as parameters in here. All of this follows what we're talking about as the Fluent APIs. So it's easy to compose them and also easy to understand. And in the end, we can then compose into what Q is going to generate as part of the template. And we also have access to what is the context that Q provides. But again, remember, the context is not evaluated while transpiling. It is only accessible at runtime from when the queue is evaluated at the controller level. But this gives us a rich set of APIs to define how our queue is going to get produced. Um, there's a lot of APIs in here. I don't want to go through all of them. That's going to take a half a day. I would recommend that people take a look at this proposal. There is currently a PR open for this. Please review them. Um, and We have a lot of evaluation criteria that we could do. Also, I've added for health and custom status. There's some out of the box that comes, for example, deployment status, deployment health, etc. That comes out of the box. But if you want to build your own health policy, you could. All of them compile obviously back into Q. Um, while that is said, this one additional benefit of using Go is that now you could potentially, but also be careful about creating objects or parameters that you could share between. You could define them once and apply them in multiple other definitions, so that reduces your uh, amount of code that you need in the Go level. So definitely you should see a good amount of code compression that is happening when you're using Go for building out the definition. Okay, I just want to go through some of the key things, and then you can create your own custom helpers for health. So in case you're using cross-plane for the underlying resources, you could look at that to understand what would make that particular component healthy or not. This has an open architecture, so you can build your own on top of whatever we have, whatever is there out of the box. And Coming to what is not supported, yeah, Q is a very flexible language. So there is a lot of things like, it allows like spreading across multiple variables, etc., which at this point is hard for us to translate equally into Go, as well as too much of nested, looping we have avoided. And in such a case, we have what we call the escape hatch, which is called a raw queue, and you could just put in the exact queue code that you'd want inside, and it will just take that as part of the part of when it compiles into queue. It's just going to print out the same thing. So that's an escape hatch for situations where we cannot support um, a queue construct directly in Go. Um, and okay, some of these are still being implemented. So some of them I'm going to reserve comment till they're actually done. But do take a look. There's a lot of literature out here on how and what these builder patterns are going to look like. Um, okay. This trade policy. Yeah, you can define just like in Q, you have these schema references. You can create blocks of schema references like health probes. Let's assume we create a health probe schema reference, and you can apply that to the liveness probe and the readiness probe. You could do the same things here as well. Um, and you can create common references that you could then apply across multiple components or traits or X definitions within your code. So again, this helps us introduce more reuse and reduce verbosity in what the entire definition looks like. You have access to IDE support. You can go between files, and it becomes easy. And most importantly, that one thing that we've been thinking about is distribution of these definitions. So far, your only recourse has been applying them individually or through add-ons, etc. Now, with these changes, you could introduce Go modules, and you can apply Go modules entirely, which would iterate through all the definitions that are present in the module and apply them. And you could compose modules which are dependent on other modules. So, if you have a platform engineering teams, a set of teams, one team working on networking, one team working on database or persistence, another team working on, maybe streaming services, etc. They could all build their own separate modules, and then you could have an Uber module that imports specific versions of these other team level modules. And that helps you create an easy way to install these definitions into a through a gated process into a Kubernetes cluster. It also helps you put in those gates for testing, etc., to be valid before things get added into this Uber definition model. And then you have semantic versioning, and it becomes easy to understand what's going on and what is there. Um, so that's in general. There's a lot of literature in here that you can continue to look at, but let's go through a little bit of demo. And that will probably clear things up a little more easily. And like I said, not everything is currently implemented. I am going to start with the idea that I want to create a new module. So I might start with Vela in.
No, make it a little bit bigger
Oh,
for the
sure.
video.
Sure. Better?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm on a very high definition screen, which is why I can't realize what you guys are seeing. Okay, so I am going to needs to be def init module, and I'm gonna say demo definitions, and let's say I want to create a component. This will help me scaffold components as I don't know, test task. Uh, and the module is GitHub. And that's it. Oh, I think it's components. Cool. Now I can go in there, and if you see, I have these folders created, and I can see that there's something called test task.go. It's already initialized for me, and it has created example scaffolding. Now, I am a Vim guy, so I can continue to use this, but one of the primary goals has been to show that you get autocomplete, etc. with an IDE. So, good. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Text okay? Okay, cool. Um, Now, okay, let's put a description. Okay, this is what happens when I am not. Oh. All right, one of the problems that right now it's erroring out is because we haven't pushed the changes. So it is trying to get this information from the remote, and these packages don't exist. So I'm going to use a replace directive. Mode replace, I think. Yeah. So this is going to just make sure that's taken from my local. Then I can do tidy. And if I go back, now the error is gone. And I'm going to say this is a sample test task. And this doesn't currently have any parameters, etc. So I'm just going to create a few parameters. Let's just say image is of type defkit.string, and CPU is of type defkit.string, and then I say that CPU is equal to defkit dot string, and I'm saying the name, the variable that's going to represent in Q is going to be CPU, and I'm going to say that it is a required field, or I could say that it's optional either. Okay, so required or optional, or by default it's optional. And I can say description is is dot optional image dot string, and what's going to represent in Q is image, and description is the that image to be used for task. And let's say that this is required. Okay. Now this shouldn't complain. What am I doing wrong? Um, defkit string. It is defkit string. Oh, it still hasn't done the okay, it might be easier to just go here. Yeah, that is correct.
You need to put var in front of it, CPU.
Maybe. I don't think that is the case. I think it's not resolving.
Hmm.
Uh, oh, it is. It is string para. Okay, so that gets me this. Now, I'm going to say that these are the parameters. So if you remember in the Q block, there is a parameter section, and I can just say dot parents CPU, comma, image, and that's it. Now, template is a template section in Q, and that here it is generating as a function that we could use. And, oh, guess what? There's something called replicas, and that's ink. Let's put that too. Replicas, defkit, int. Should we make this? Let's make this optional. But you know what? I want to give a default value. So I'm going to say default is 1. And similarly for CPU, let's assume that I don't give any value. Then either I could leave it as is, or I could just say default of 1. Okay, I have this. Keep forgetting I'm not on Vim. I don't need this. And here I'm saying set this value. But the problem is, what if the user has not set replicas? I can just do set if, and I can say replicas replicas dot is set. If it is set, then go ahead and do this change. Otherwise, don't. Similarly, I could say set if CPU dot is set. Then I could say spec dot templates dot template dot spec dot containers of 0 dot resources dot limit dot CPU. Let's assume it's only for the limit. So I nicely got everything done, written. Great, all that's good. But now what? So let's take a look at K9s, and I have a K3D cluster. As you will see, there is nothing called test task in here. So I'm going to do Vela. First, I can list all the definitions that are there in that particular module. So demo definition. So I'm in current. definitions, def. You'll see there is one component and it's got a test task component. It is okay. I haven't applied anything. And let's say I want to apply this, but before I apply, I want to see what it brings out. So, what did it print out? So, gave what we gave as description, and if you remember, resources limit. If there is CPU not empty, then CPU dot parameter. And if you remember, we had put CPU. Oh, why didn't replicas come up here? Good question. Let's take a look. I added replicas here, but I never added it to the parameters. So, replicas. Add that there. And let's run this thing again. And now you see if replicas is not equal to empty, then this is there. The parameters that are supposed to be this CPU sets a default of 1, image is string, and replicas is this. Cool. So this sort of shows me that I can check. And if I want to generate the queue, before, before and you could have many number of definitions. I could do that. Do that here, or I can say -o demo generated is the name of the folder it needs to create. Okay, now I see demo generated. And you can see that there's a queue here and shows all the thing that we just saw as part of the dry run. Let's now go ahead and apply this. See what happens. Oh. Okay, it applied. Or so it says. So let's confirm. And there we are. And there we are. We can see that it's been applied. Questions so far?
No, very cool.
Okay, next, what we're going to do is, in many cases, we have situations where we have definitions that need to be applied. For example, if you're building out an AWS load balancer infrastructure, you only want to apply that to an EKS cluster or using crossplane. You only want to apply that in EKS, and you don't want to run that in GCP or, for example, a V cluster that you could be running inside. You don't need those to be. So there is this concept of placing these definitions correctly. So we're gonna do one more demo. So let's come here and let's just say that this will only run on label, and let's say and this should never run on You just made it explicit. I could have done that with one, but just making it explicit now. Now you could, it could be any labels. Now, what does this label mean? I've been looking at the Vela cluster label, but since we have not yet gotten to the multi-cluster side of things, the easiest way for us to determine if what a current cluster is to have a well-known config map. So the name of the config map is pretty explicit. Yeah. So it's going to be Vela cluster identity. So you need to apply this config map into the namespace of Vela system, and you can give any number of labels or config map parameters in there. So for this case, I right now am on K3D demo primary. I have two K3D clusters. And you see that I'm currently on primary. And if I you will see that the primary shows as AWS, and I go to secondary and I get the same config map. It shows that it's on it has a cloud provider name as GCP. Now let's go back. And you know what? Let's delete that definition. Okay, it's deleted. And let's try applying the module again. Okay. Oh, using the wrong. And it applied because we said that it should run on AWS, not on GCP, right? So let's switch over to the secondary and apply the same thing. And you get the component definition is skipped because the run-on condition is not satisfied because the cloud provider is not equal to AWS. Cool. Along with this, there are also a bunch of testing, matches that I've added to help with Ginkgo and Go Omega. An example I can give is, so let's say this is the default cron task from what we have in Kubevela. In the Vela templates, and this is the Golang equivalent of it, and this is the test. So you can, there are a few matches like have parameter name, resource of kind, has version conditionals, all of those things also being put in. More of this will be documented so that you can write your tests a lot more easily. And yeah, with that, I think I'm done. But we are very excited about the possibility of what this can enable for the future. We want to enable this for the add-ons as well to support both the Q definition and also the Go definitions. So the idea is that we'll probably add a folder called GoDef inside the add-on. And then when you enable an add-on, it is going to compile the currently, I think the Q code is under what is called definitions. It would compile from the GoDef into the definitions and then apply. Again, all of this is side effect free because none of this is changing anything in the controller. You can decide to approach and take these piecemeal one after the other. and or mix and match as you feel appropriate. But I think this is a lot of potential as we move forward into what we could do with this and with other areas as well. But this is not going to be a silver bullet. This will not do everything that Q does. In some cases, you may have to use raw Q. But at that point, I think I would encourage you guys to think about how can you simplify that queue and apply better software principles instead of that would be more amenable to go. But at the same time, if you think it is wiser to just do it in queue, you have always that option to go back to. Cool. That was the demo. Questions?
Is this just components and traits for now, or are we planning to expand it to workflow steps or
Workflow steps as well. So let
support them
me show
already,
you.
or
Sorry.
it supports them already, or we have plans? Sorry.
It's there, but unfortunately, I haven't. Not all the workflow steps are easy to do. So many of them, I just took the raw queue route. Yeah, just put the whole thing in there. But that is a good first step to get into the Go modules model, and then you can then iterate and apply the Fluent APIs as we think. And some of those, may not be amenable into the Fluent APIs, and some, so they may remain as raw queue, or we'll have to introduce new Fluent APIs that will support some of those features, etc. But yeah, you could right now. I've applied. This is in my personal fork. Sorry, in my personal org. It's called Vela definitions, and here, all the components, policies, and traits have been sort of converted, but not yet completely tested.
Cool. And then does it have QX support? Like, can we call a QX function, or is that
I
future stuff?
mean, if it is part of what needs to be written into the queue, it doesn't natively have a QX support API, Fluent API, but I think that should be easy enough to add. I
Yeah.
think we
They're
can,
fairly structured. I think, the parameters are always in a consistent format return. So,
yeah. So
uh,
I think that should be an easy thing for us to do. But I haven't looked at those yet.
cool. Other than that, it looks cool. The config map thing, I'm a little bit. Do we need that config map, or can we rig this to the cluster labels?
We could from the node, but I thought that was lot more brittle and changes by the cloud provider of any sort. Then we have to go change our logic to identify what it is. And
Yeah.
it may not be the cloud provider. It might be other things that we may want to source our decision on, right? At least in Guidewire, we have V clusters versus the AWS, EKS, etc. So and what might be an easy and to be honest, I didn't find anything better, but I'm open to any other suggestions that we could use that could apply this universally to any sort of Kubernetes distribution. So if you guys could think, and if you have any suggestion on that part, I'm happy to relook.
So right now, it kind of mandates you need to have that config map, and it has to be in a particular format. So
If you want placement control, then you need that well-known this. But once we start supporting multi-cluster, then there is something called Vela cluster labels. You can apply labels to those cluster resources, and you could potentially use that as another one. But again, not everybody is potentially using multi-cluster mode.
Oh,
So we use
actually,
it.
it's on our backlog internally that it would be
Sure,
nice.
but for the open source, we need to support both.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, it's on our backlog to contribute to the open source, a way to
Right.
label the local cluster in the same fashion as the managed clusters, because you kind of do
Yeah,
have that. consistency
Yeah.
that
What I meant is that not everybody might make use of the multi-cluster control plane way of deploying, and hence
yeah.
you
But
need
it'd be
to be
nice
able to
if
support both
if
models.
you're still using single node Kubevela, that the local cluster still supports labeling and you can set it up in the same fashion. So that's in the backlog. So it'd be nice if we had that, and then you could use cluster labels with replacement
Yeah.
codes.
So once we get into the multi-cluster mode, I think it becomes a lot more easier. But then we want to keep the experience similar. So if it's placement.labels, I already know if I'm in a multi-cluster mode, I'm going to use the cluster labels. If not, I'm going to fall back to the config map or something else.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else? Any other ideas that you guys are getting that we could use this for? Because I believe this will open up a lot more ways of doing things that we could, which previously was probably a little restricted.
If no one else is gonna jump in, I'll continue. So I think reuse is the big one here. I think the biggest issue we have internally with Q is the amount of redundant code you have to write in each definition. And I think there is packages in there, but they're kind of misunderstood and not used very frequently. And I think this is just much more native to what people know. Import, go, write reusable code into modules or whatever, and then import it in. And then, you know, it's much easier to have 10 variants of the same component with slight differences now than, having to
Yeah.
maintain 10 completely separate definitions.
Exactly. If you use functions and as a way of input that can use builder pattern, that makes it a lot more easier to change those subtle things, but keep the amount of code to the minimum based on those patterns. So I think, yeah, that what you said is absolutely right. Reuse should become a lot more easily and natural.
It also opens the potential for AI, right? Because Go code is much better than Q when it comes to integrating AI features.
Sure, it's probably more well understood, but I
Yeah.
think AI can easily grok what a Q grammar is as well if needed. The question is going to be at what abstraction level and at what cost to the
Yeah.
consumer or the user. Um, there are probably more people who understand Go than understand Q. So
But now
if
the even the
AI,
abstract but now the abstraction can also be auto-generated, right? With this.
oh yes, I have used AI for some of these things. So yes.
So Anup, does this mean that like we can now have different versions of the definition based on different scenarios? Um
No, that underlying aspect doesn't change. The only thing is how this is packaged will change because in the end, it's all going to be Q, and you have versions of the definition, and that is going to remain the same unless you obviously change it in the Q or in the component definition itself. So all of that is going to remain the same. So remember, this is not runtime.
yeah.
This is the scaffold that will create the queue, which then becomes the runtime in the controller. So that
But
part doesn't change.
I mean, back
But
to
we should,
reuse though, if you like if only like one line of Q changes between an internal and an external definition, it's now
yeah,
much easier to write a function that takes an argument saying is internal or is external and then
right.
generate the same code with a
Generate
very
exactly.
different
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
component.
So
you
So
could.
you-
yeah.
You could do a lot more validations of the input because when people again, this by itself is not going to be enough. This we are also working on what is the app SDK so that we can provide a similar Fluent API based approach for building out applications. And then that would use some of these things as well. So you can validate, do a lot of checking of values, type checks, for example. All of those things you could do at compile time before it even gets into queue. So your chances of getting wrong there by putting in a string when it should have been an integer, and all of those things would be taken care of. And yes, you get the reuse, but like I said, the versioning aspect of thing doesn't change.
Yeah, yeah. But what I meant more was what Brian was explaining. We could now have different definitions generated dynamically based on parameterizing these environmental variables and so on. Right? For AWS, you can generate it dynamically. For other environments, you can, if you parameterize it, we can generate these definitions dynamically.
Assuming the diff between those are not too much, because at
Yeah.
that point, if it is too much, then I would just write a different definition. Especially, I would prefer writing a different definition, especially if they have two different functions, right? I
Got
don't
it.
want to create one definition that creates an RDS and a DynamoDB.
No, yeah, definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Because they would, I mean, reuse though the components that are common to each of them. If
Yeah.
you create common references and common objects, then you can reuse them. That you can definitely do, but I wouldn't go as far as using the same definition to generate other um, two different types of definitions, underlying
Got it.
definitions, and so on.
No, I mean, that's really just kind of referring to like internally we have the need for, hey, we want an internal version of an S3 component and an external version, and they might have slightly different parameters for the two different audiences, and there
That
are
you
some
could, yes,
differences, but
Yeah.
the same
That's exactly what
audience.
I'm referring to. Yeah.
yeah, that definitely you could, and that. I'm thinking maybe if we expand the function of the placements, you could base it off of that too.
Yeah.
That you only add certain parameters if the placement type is of this.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah.
Because you don't want to then the otherwise the user has to then switch on based on parameters and he has to know the different parameter types. And by the way, the parameters type also support enums, so you can give different enums much more easily for validation as well. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. As in when we hit such a use case, we can definitely look at what we can do to improve it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't currently input like a context in while rendering, can you?
You can. There is something called Vela context that you can reference if that's what you mean.
No, so when you're executing your Vela apply modules
Uh-huh.
command, we pass parameters in at that point that can be read, statically in these definitions. And then that way you can, kind of like feature flag things depending on where you're enabling it.
The versions.
Well, no, actually, because they're static files. No, never mind, actually. Um, no, never mind. It's not a use case.
Okay. Cool. Anything else?
Anup, we have a feature of queue validation where we support the parameter validation, or if something is missing. So, like the defkit, does it have some built-in function like it can support some raw validation and enhance
Yeah.
the queue validation logic?
Yeah. So I don't know, Vishal, probably you missed it. Let's see. I can put defaults. And let's assume replicas is default is to one, and I want to say, you cannot put more than three. You can say max three. You can do that. Max, is
Can
it
we define
max?
our custom validation also like string cannot be more than some character and we should not start with as like there are some built-in custom
Yeah,
validation
you can. You can.
comparing
There's
to
something called conditions. and you can create conditions and use that conditions to check for truthiness of that condition. You could do that too. I don't have an example right now, but we can do that. And I'm trying to figure out why I can't.
Does that in a string?
Is it a string? Replica is int.
Oh yeah, but do conditions apply to strings and ints, or is it only certain ones? Or?
No, the int has, or maybe I haven't added that yet. I'm pretty sure there is a. Um, mm, if not, that's an easy one to add. You can attach to that struct and add more conditions that you want. And there is already existing a bunch of conditions, variance, optional, and I think I can make an array list, checks within this. But yeah, Vishal, you can. You should be able to create your own condition and apply that. Does that answer your question? I
Yes.
can find out the exact line and share that with you. So there's one condition here that you see the version, if it is, it's less than minor version of it's less than 25, then use batch v1 beta 1, whereas if it's greater than 25, then use batch v1. I think I know why I was not able to see. So there are some of those things that you can add.
I think
Does it answer your
there's.
question, Vishal?
Yeah, yes, sir.
I think we need to have the validations as well. That there's like for a string, you can apply a regex that has to match.
Yes, there
You
is there is a regex matcher as well.
Oh, sweet. Cool.
I have to just remember what these method names are. Uh, yeah, there is a matcher. And if not, again, these are simple things and easy things that we can add to an existing type of parameter value.
Good to me.
Cool.
So when will this be ready in its totality and in production and
I think I'm possibly going to create a PR. This is going to be a huge PR, and yeah, and Srijit and team, Gautam and Srijit, you guys need to figure out when you can test this. Please do not use AI for testing. I want the human in the loop testing to make sure that those things work. And then once that is ready, I think we should be good to merge.
Yep, sure, Anup. Yeah.
sweet.
Right now, it's all in my branch called defkit implementation. Cool. I'm gonna stop share for the time being.